Hello and welcome back to the Race Strategy Society. Today we are going to be debriefing the Miami Grand Prix. Round 4, Antonelli makes it 3 in a row, and what we're going to be going into today is the strategy decisions that shaped that race. First, how did Mercedes get a one-up on McLaren? Could McLaren have done anything differently? And then also that call by Red Bull to box under the safety car. Was there any chance that they could have won the race? Was it good or was it bad? Okay. First off, everything we're going to go into is so much easier to say after it. We're going to do deep dive analysis, the kind of analysis that the Formula One teams do on a Monday. The level of time and depth that we go into here isn't stuff that you can always do live during a race before it sounds like we're being a bit too mean to McLaren. But let's get into it. Okay, so end of lap 25, Lando Norris is leading that Miami Grand Prix. Antonelli in the Mercedes is 2 seconds behind him on the road. Verstappen is ahead on track with tyres 20 laps older than his, right? Lando's on the radio asking his pit wall to bring him in, and they wait 1 lap. That 1 lap, so the end of lap 26 to lap 27, is the race, and that's ultimately what we're going to go into today. Antonelli ended up winning the entire race by just 3.264 seconds. So it's the smallest gap between the first Mercedes and non-Mercedes car we've had all season. So pace difference was a lot smaller than we've had before. So that decisive lap, end of lap 26, Antonelli boxes from second place and puts the hards on. The outlap is fast, lap 27, Lando pits a lap later and emerges side by side. The Mercedes is on a lap warmer, the tyres are warm, and then down to turn 4, deployment boost, lead change, and Antonelli keeps it. The interesting question, could Lando have just pitted first? Well, yes, but only if McLaren had committed by the end of lap 25. Pitting on lap 26 with Antonelli was a coin flip on the Mercedes tyre warm-up and the pit stop itself. Pitting on lap 25, 1 lap ahead of the move Mercedes were going to make, would have been the winning call. Now, Mercedes were faster on every phase of the cycle. In lap 0.62 seconds faster, pits transit itself, so that's everything from the pit lane to pit stop, 1.55 seconds faster. Outlap on hards, 0.54 seconds faster. Cumulative execution game, 2.71 seconds. The pre-pit stop gap was about 2 seconds, so maths basically just puts Antonelli ahead by 7/10 at the pit exit, which is why you get that side-by-side you saw on the broadcast. The reason why McLaren didn't play the early stop, for me, is mostly Max Verstappen. So why did McLaren wait? Cast back to lap 6, Hadjar's on the wall at turn 13, Lawson and Gasly tangling at turn 17, the Alpine is on its roof, safety car. The Red Bull, with Verstappen recovering from his own turn 2 spin, take that pit stop under safety car. And out comes Verstappen from P10 to 16th with fresh hards and 51 laps to go. Red Bull were intending to go to the end. They did 45 laps on a set of hard tyres back in 2023 to win the race, doing a reverse strategy. 51 laps, for me, was a great call. Little to lose, lots to gain, is what I said to my team at the time. By lap 25, Max is back on the lead lap, and he's now actually close to them on track, right? Ahead of the gap when you box and you come out behind. So when I say virtually ahead, it's that if Lando, who's leading the race, is to box now and take his pit stop, he's going to come out behind Max. There's less than 20 seconds between them. And I'm going to keep saying that the tyres were 20 laps older because it matters. So if he pits, he's going to come out behind a Red Bull, but that tyres are 20 laps older. Potentially 2 or 3 laps stuck behind him, absolute maximum. It's not a lot in the long run, but I do appreciate that the time it takes to clear that car could have been something that maybe releases Antonelli if the Mercedes was much faster and able to overcut. So McLaren, they waited for Verstappen to clear naturally. They were faster than them. It's defensible. They also looked from the radio comms to be a little bit worried about rain arriving, and more so than some other teams, and so they waited. And on Sunday, that was the call that ultimately lost them the race. So there was a rain risk, there was a risk of boxing behind Verstappen, but they were ultimately the smaller of the two problems on the McLaren pit wall, and they treated it as the bigger one. Now, the overcut. Some of you will be thinking, could Mercedes have stayed out and overcut Lando with fresh tyres at the end? For me, looking at the numbers, they couldn't. And actually, the undercut was the only chance. Not like in the first three races where I think they had the pace to do it. I don't think they had that in Mercedes. So the hard tyre deg in the second stint on every car. So Lando lost about 0.04 a second per lap. He was actually the lowest in the field. Antonelli on the same compound was second lowest, so 4.5 a lap. The McLaren was not going to kind of like die on the old tyres from the Mercedes to bank lap time on new one. So the overcut really needs the leader to fade, and Lando wasn't really fading. From lap 13 to 26, his medium tyre pace was staying basically inside of 0.2. So his opening lap was a 32.9. Last clear racing lap was a 33.0. So his mediums were still alive. So Mercedes had one window, the undercut, and they took it. The reason it worked is the same reason Antonelli was on pole on Saturday. The Mercedes tyre warm-up over a single lap push is the best in the field. It's a different session, but I think they used the same weapon there. They also used information from Russell. So Russell boxed on lap 20. Actually, I thought that was a little bit early, to be honest. It was 6 laps before Antonelli. And the reason why I thought it was a bit early is because the rain risk was quite a bit higher then, but they did it, and well done to them. So I think they used the data from Russell, who undercut both Charles and Piastri in that move, to be able to do it. So Russell's outlap on hards came in at 32.6. So it was a quarter of a second faster than Lando's racing pace at the same time. So it was a really good pit stop, and it was a really good example of the undercut working. Charles pitted on lap 21, slow stop, 3.7 seconds, got undercut by Russell. From that moment, basically Charles was out of thing. He was racing for 4th, not 3rd. And then he spent the next 30 laps tucked into Piastri's gearbox. Piastri, with McLaren, they stayed out even longer than the front group. They boxed him on lap 28. Remember, they couldn't box him on lap 27 without doing a double stop. 2 laps after Antonelli, 1 after Lando. McLaren effectively split those cars. Piastri, he had an extra couple of laps, but again, he wasn't really there, and he only really caught Max at the very end of the lap. Now, at the very end of the race, Charles also tried to respond. He pushed very hard, spun, clipped the wall, limped over the line to 6th. He said it himself, that was on him. So it was just 0.3 of overdrive that ultimately cost him those positions. Now, Verstappen's recovery maths. So, Max finished 5th on the road, 43 seconds to Antonelli, 27 to Piastri. For a podium, Red Bull would have needed about 0.35 seconds a lap of additional pace, sustained across that 45-lap stint. Is tyre durability a hard compound that holds for 10 laps? Pirelli didn't give them that in terms of the tyre, but also they would need to have had a bit more pace. So between tyre and car pace, they did not have enough to win. It is tyre pace, and ultimately it's a car deficit. So they didn't have the tyre to win it, and they didn't have the car to win it. But great call, great recovery call, and it put them in a position where they could have potentially won it if that rain had arrived, or if there'd been a safety car towards the end and they'd been able to take a cheap stop and they'd been out of sequence. And it put them in a chance to get a podium position and ultimately recover from P10. Very little to lose, lots to gain. Mercedes margin, why is it shrinking? 3 races, the gap from the winning Mercedes to the first non-Mercedes was 15.5 in Australia for Charles to Leclerc, 13.7 in Japan, Antonelli to Piastri, 25.3 in China, Antonelli to Hamilton. And on Sunday, it was only 3.264. The Mercedes hasn't slowed down, but the field has caught up. Now, why is that? 3 things, all of them factored. In rough order of contribution: circuit, upgrades, regulations. None of these are measured to 3 decimal places. They're all estimates. It's the size of them that ties out. So first off, the circuit. Miami is one of the lower on energy recovery layouts in the calendar. Long straights, big braking events, plenty of room for battery to refill, and the Mercedes deployment edge, full power for roughly 28 seconds a lap, while the rest of the field is running 22, 24. It matters less here than in Suzuka and Shanghai. And the Mercedes is not the fastest car in the corners. It didn't look like it in the first few races, but we combined that with the upgrades. So McLaren bought a floor, loads of different bits. Williams lost weight, Ferrari brought aero. In fact, there was only 2 teams, Aston and Mercedes, that didn't bring any upgrades to Miami. So they brought nothing. That's also worth a 10th a lap. Regulations. We've now had rules, right? So 6 races into a new rule set is when teams are going to stop chasing like headline lap times and start finding the operating window. We haven't quite got there yet, but energy management, things like that, I think is all going to be part of it. The implication is circuit dependent. You know, Barcelona will widen it again. I think, you know, when we go to Canada, we're going to see it widen again, and Mercedes have got their own upgrade package coming. Monaco could be very, very tight. The Antonelli Championship is real, and it's not gonna compound at the same rate as it did in Suzuka and Shanghai. And George will be pretty thankful that Antonelli lost at least a couple of points in the sprint. So Lando, it was his stint 2 pace and hards, was lap for lap marginally faster than Antonelli's, which is really interesting, right? Lap 33, Lando a 31.9, Antonelli a 32.1, and the McLaren had its racing pace, it just couldn't get it back. So for me, this race only, Mercedes won it on execution and speed, not just speed. The undercut locked in the order before Lando could use what he had. So what's the takeaway? Well, the Mercedes pit wall outplayed the McLaren pit wall. The data was from Russell, the conviction was from Mercedes, and the outlap was Antonelli's. The strategists definitely helped earn this one. Lando did have a point about being pit earlier. McLaren had a defensible reason for waiting, and they still got it wrong. The championship story is now all about convergence, car paces, they're all getting really close. Antonelli's 20 points clear. And if he keeps winning by smaller margins either time, it's going to spice up. So 3 in a row. Next race is Canada. But before then, I'm about to head onto a plane to the month of May to go to Indianapolis. So might get a little bit of an update on strategy from the home of IndyCar. See you later.